dad never understood my job. Video games are an obscure concept to him, and he thinks that I decide what games are. I'm like, no, Dad, we work in collective creation. My job is not to tell people if it's better in pink, blue. It's most definitely not my job. I work with teams around the world. I nourish their mature creative. I feed them inspiration. I want to empower teams to make video games a more impactful media. So, we work on Assassin's Creed, Tom Clancy games, Watch Dogs, Far Cry. And Ubisoft developers work with head office on creating worlds. Now, worlds are super complex to create. They're fueled by systems. They're a simulation. They're actually opportunities for people to learn. I have two sons, Nemo and Owen. I'm a gamer. I like to think that when they'll be playing games, when they're done playing a game, maybe they're smarter because they've learned something from the experience they've had. So with that in mind, I worked very hard creating tools, creating mindsets to help Ubisoft developers create more immersive, impactful worlds. I believe in videos, so I will now show you something called world logic. It's, let's just call it a creative process to create logic worlds. First video, please.
Every event is the result of a network of elements coexisting in a coherent world. An arrow shot from the bow of a Native American hunter is the result of the hostility between cowboys and Indians, an act of aggression caused when a cowboy stands too close to a herd of buffaloes. The fort isn't here by coincidence. It was built to control a conquered portion of Indian territory. It was established close to a forest for food and wood, near a gold mine to protect pioneers gathering valuable resources. It's also a strategic spot between two rivers to ensure trade and travel. The nearby cliff limits the possibility of an incoming attack. Now that the region is safe, a village begins to grow around the fort. When the city becomes profitable, a railway is built to transport people and resources back and forth, and ultimately to turn the outpost into a starting point for further conquest. The train station will benefit from the fort's protection against the natives. Being pushed away by the flourishing city, the native village has now moved closer to this new herd, and it stands in the way of the advancing railway. The conflict isn't going to end anytime soon. With the city growing, new layers enrich this ecosystem. The state of the world is the logical consequence of the history we've just built for it, and as the player moves on to another region, it will inevitably impact and enrich the entire ecosystem of the game. Logic isn't the only important factor for imagining a world. We must also make sure it is consistent. Building lore for an open-world game means identifying the 3 or 4 underlying ideas that form the basis, the pillars of the game. For instance, if in your game you play as a Native American hunter in a Western frontier context, the pillars might be war, Native American culture, and hunter fantasy. Correctly identifying and researching the pillars is of the utmost importance. Every aspect of the game must respond to these pillars, as well as the themes and logic they imply. For example, racial antagonism implies situations which deal with humiliation. Opposing beliefs could relate to religion, and genocide refers to explicit violence and cruelty. If one of these themes isn't well thought through due to misconceptions or self-censorship, the whole structure of the game becomes fragile. If, because of self-censorship, you decide not to include Native Americans because that period of history is too controversial, the whole game starts losing consistency and interest. Changing that pillar to something else might look like a good solution in the short term, but in the end it will affect the other pillars and the consistency of the entire game. Changing a pillar means changing the whole concept of the game. It's the same with external input that does not fit with the consistency of your world, previous iterations of an IP, demands from departments, or market assumptions. If you modify your pillars for the wrong reasons during production, the logic of your world will implode. But let's get back to our Western, and let's acknowledge the dark side of American history. Now, all the aspects of this context will influence everything you'll be able to develop for the game. Missions, events, characters, side quests, tone, and so on. Time spent doing thorough research is hugely important because it's a first step towards creative understanding. So embrace that first step candidly without putting preconceived ideas in it. Following all these guidelines implies a very strict design process which takes time, effort, and expects you to think candidly. But they are the essential factors for providing a healthy environment that will allow your game world to grow. We must make meaningful choices and embrace the logical consequences of these choices. That's how world logic is created.
So, I'm very curious. I love to read books. I love to watch movies. They're wonderful entrance points for research. But when you create a world, I think it's actually a trap to only read books and things. We think we know everything. I've seen every movie on Las Vegas. I'm here today with you guys in Las Vegas, and I think maybe I can do a world that depicts Las Vegas. Well, I don't think that's true. I think that the most important thing, we fight for player immersion. It needs to start with our own immersion. So how do we do this? We go smell the grass. All right, we have to get out from behind our computers. We have to go meet people, listen to stories. Nothing beats, I can spend a year on Wiki research in Vegas. As blah as an airport is, the first 5 seconds when I step out, I see the energy, the cabs, the people, the pace, the smell. Already, it's putting me on leads, on tracks. So it's about enriching players' lives. It's about making sure that my sons are smarter people when they spent hundreds of hours playing one of my open world games. This is essential in education and making meaningful experiences. With that in mind, I believe we make wonderful open world games at Ubisoft. A few years ago, we released a game called Far Cry 4. It's set in the fictional world of Karat, but it's heavily inspired by Nepal. I will now show you a small video of their trip there. Next video, please. So we sent them to Nepal. I believe the Far Cry team has some of the most talented people in the industry. They're very smart. As Dan Hay puts it, the executive producer on the brand, I think that although they were smart people, they had built a Disneyland version of Nepal. A couple days into that trip, they were calling the production team and like, oh, we got the proportions wrong, we got this wrong. And these guys had thousands of pictures referencing it, but nothing. You just listening to people, their point of view, their lives. We always say like the devil's in the details, and that's what they give you, right? I'm originally from New Jersey. I usually say New York because people laugh when I say Jersey. Now, we're getting ready to release a game called Tom Clancy's The Division, right? So I'm like, I know this area. I know New York. I was raised in this area. Yet, for Tom Clancy's The Division, I went with the team to do research. Well, with a different point of view, listening to different people, we obsess about making great entertainment. Other people obsess on other systems in life, social, politic, economics, whatever they are. And they teach me so much. I think I found out more about New York. There's not a day went by where I'm like, oh my God, this exists. Again, I like videos. I'll show you a small video of our New York research for The Division, and I'll talk about a few anecdotes after.
Weather outside is frightful, but that fire is delightful. Since we've no place to go, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
When you have sort of a catastrophe situation, you can't do a mass evacuation of New York. We don't have the means or capacity to get you out of the city right now. They're gonna say, just stay where you are.
Snow, let it snow.
In that case, you may have people that are trying to get out, potentially getting yourself shot. You're going to have tunnels and those types of things that are not necessarily mapped, but if you can get underground, there's chances that you can get out of the city. There's a secret subway tube that was built up to the Waldorf Astoria. If you want to take control of a building, the basement's actually the key, because you can cut the power to the individual building, you can cut off the water supply with the standpipes and the pumps, you cut off all the communications. And there's some type of pathogen outbreak. You have people that are going, you're going to give me this vaccination or your wife, daughter, so-and-so is getting killed. That could certainly happen.
So Tom Clancy's The Division is developed out of Sweden in Malmö. Again, an extremely talented team. You know, we started work on this, and these guys are very savvy. They know pop culture. They've seen a million movies on New York, and that's the visible part of the iceberg. You know, so they start work, and I'm like, well, we've seen all this. We know New York. I'm like, no. This is it's another creator's creative process. You become a digestion of their creative process. You become a diluted version. It's like all these bad fantasy books that try to copy Lord of the Rings without understanding Tolkien was a linguist and researched his subject, and that it references codes, myth in the book. I don't want to be the diluted of the diluted of the diluted of someone else's work. So with that in mind, you know, The Division is about a quarantined Manhattan. Now, we wanted notions of hope to be present. It's a game about consumerism as well, so we decided to set it during Christmas time. And when we started development, you know, they were like, I see like the streets of New York, and like there are 3 Christmas lights in the background. I'm like, no guys, you don't get it. When I go home for Christmas, I listen to FM stations dedicated to Christmas music. There's not a mall I go to that doesn't have Christmas music. I Christmas carol. All the houses are decorated, and they're like, they're just not getting it. So go to New York, get it. We sent them to New York to get the feel of the Christmas spirit and the tradition and what it means in American culture or Northeast culture. Same thing. You saw we interviewed an emergency expert. Reality always surpasses fiction. He's like, his job is basically to run simulations, Excel spreadsheets of how much it would cost if a catastrophe happens in New York. So in this instance, it's a pathogen virus. They would have to quarantine New York. The first thing he says is power would go down within days. The same way we sent battleships when there was a tsunami in Southeast Asia, we would bring battleships into the bay. We would literally pull cables into the grid. I like the image. It's iconic. It's Akira. It's jacked in to the grid. And they are nuclear. They purify water. And they can hold 3,000 people. The second thing we do is we bring in love boats. They can hold thousands of people and purify water. And he's like, and then again, reality surpasses fiction. He looks at me, he's like, you live in Paris? I'm like, yes. You have a space problem? Yes. When you have guests over, you need a mattress? I'm like, yes. He's like, but we Americans are more lazy than you guys, so we all have inflatable mattresses. That's an issue for us, because this means that people will inflate their mattresses and try to escape. And we have to control that. And perhaps we'll have to put together a system, kind of a Mexican border type thing, to prevent people from fleeing the Manhattan Peninsula. What it creates, the image of like a civilian and military quarantine around it with gun-turret boats around. I could never have written something like that. I'd have been like, no way. It's totally exceeds anything I could imagine. So again, go smell the grass. Now, unfortunately, we don't have infinite money. I can only send a few developers, right? Hundreds of people make these games. Hundreds of people make them over multiple locations. So at Ubisoft, we've created something called the World Texture Facility Tool. Again, videos are much better than words. Next video, please.
The life of a developer is a tough one. You play all night long while being abusively charged for being a lazy partner. But the toughest thing is to be efficient in the morning, when the world you have to build is an entire digital NYC with hundreds of people, stories, cultures, historical facts, and so on. Lucky you, an incredible tool exists to help your daily work, enhance your team's knowledge, and simplify your already very complex life. Just connect to the WTF, browse the world map, and choose the location your game is set in. This World Texture facility is indeed an easy access to everything you wanted to know but were afraid to ask. Filled with hundreds of posts, pictures, videos, interviews, and links to in-depth researches. Need to know where bums gather to drink in Manhattan, or how many kilos of cocaine yuppies put in their nose during the 80s? No problem. The WTF has the answers. Depending on the amount of beer you drank last night, you can choose to be led by the tool and randomly discover the subjects of the daily inspiration. Or you can proactively dive into the countless categories to find highly specific info. The ass lickers can even choose the must-see banner, a compilation of the core team's favorite topics. Thanks to the WTF, everyone can easily share, comment, and highlight information without waiting days for a meeting with no room available. No more folders, thousands of pages, tons of books piled up on desks. No more never-ending speeches. An image is worth 1,000 words. The WTF is a unique Ubisoft tool designed to be an encyclopedia of genuine, unexpected, and homemade info you would never find elsewhere. The only thing you need to do is get curious. The WTF will do the rest. Have a nice, enriching day.
What kind of fucked up toy is this?
So it's a digital database that all developers have access to that's here to inspire their work, all right? Now, and again, you know, we already have a lot of newsletters, we already have a lot of tools, so I'm always looking at, like, I'm trying to be respectful of people having different minds, of being different. So digital's cool, everyone can use it over multiple locations, but I also believe in physical things. So then we decided to create a book. It's about 0.1% of what's in there. This book, I know you're not going to see anything, and we're all getting older here, unfortunately, and wise, on the other hand, goes over pictures. It classifies different things. It shows you Grand Central, but the behind the scenes, the workers. You know, we bring a 360 point of view on the world. In the movies, you get the frame and everything is imagination. In our worlds, players can look under, over. Again, these are scans from the book, so Christmas is important. There's a whole section dedicated to that. I want developers to, this is Steve Duncan. He took us under Central Park. He showed us that one of the reasons there are less homeless people in Manhattan is because they unfortunately live under Central Park. It's sci-fi. This last thing was a map we built from our own data. It spatializes prisons and police stations to gangs. Okay, so we're playing with codes. Again, a point of view, a way of looking at a world and developing something like that. These are just tools. What I'm interested in is the mature creative, a way of building worlds. So one of the things we toyed with as well, this is going back to Far Cry, we're like, how can teams play with the world and see it and discuss it together? We created something called Whopper. Next video, please. So the point here was to let people play with day and night cycles, seasons. You know, if I place an outpost here on top of a mountain and during the winter it's covered up in snow, does it really make any sense? Animals need to be around water. Like, it's a million details like that that create consistency and that make our systems things that we can relate to and relate to life. So I can really learn new things. But all this is fine, but I believe in more. Again, these are just vessels. Actually, the Whopper didn't work that well at UB because it took up too much space, because it was maybe because we're changing our world on the fly. So if I print my world once and I need to change it the next day, it's kind of dumb. But at least we're exploring new directions to let developers play with that. You know, in my mind, I imagine that immersion will be in VR. The WTF could be in VR. I should be able to be in New York, augment my own reality within the VR world, see how you're connected to this person, to this object. Stories, you know, meet faces and stories. For me, it's what we do as entertainers. We have a responsibility to maybe make the world a better place, or our children better people than we are, because they get access to all this knowledge. So I can only invite you to come to UB and help me create more tools, work with our talented development teams to, create new things to inspire people. I'm a geek, so I believe in bonuses. I will now show you one last video. Last E3, we announced a game called Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands. So that game is set in Bolivia. I'll now show you before I show you the video, actually, I think that because it's an exotic location, most of us think Bolivia is South America. Every country specific. I come from the East Coast. When I'm in Vegas, it's a very different place. Same thing for LA. So we sent the team there. This is a video of the research over there. This was life-changing for the developers. You know, we worked for months to find the right fixers. This is very important in doing research, so you don't create cultural snafus, so you're respectful of the people who are there. So one of the things we were able to do is we were able to secure a training session with the Garris. The Garris are an elite unit in the Bolivian army who fight the narcs. So the team didn't listen to an expert tell stories, romanticized stories of his past military life. They lived with him for a week in the jungle. They burned cocaine labs. They realized that cocaine is a form of colonialism, that in Bolivia, cocaine doesn't get used. It's for us when we party. They realized that coca leaf is their coffee, their tea. They use it in religion. They use it for mountain sickness. They use it as something they chew for high energy. All right? You may have seen certain glitches in the video. We filmed the process of synthesizing cocaine, 27 chemicals. Part of the reasons houses aren't finished in Bolivia, it's not just for tax evasion, because so much cement is being used in cocaine that the industry uses all of it up and people don't have it. You saw people in that video who are just like you and I. They grow coca, but again, for their religion, for everyday life. They grow a little bit more because they need to make ends meet. Bolivia is the poorest country in South America. So you saw people pull out leaves. That's the military. They don't put them in jail. It's controlled by GPS. You saw the Salar. It's a tourist attraction, the biggest salt desert in the world. You know, I hear people say, why you go to Bolivia? The biggest salt lake in the world means the largest lithium reserve in the world. Everyone here has lithium in their smartphones. All right, so I think it's pretty strategic in our future. Again, it broke the team's preconceived ideas of what Bolivia was, and more importantly, it made them want to fight for a dream. Responsibility towards people, towards stories, towards a country, towards our players. It's immersion. I see people from many different countries here. I'm a curious guy. I'd love to meet you after this speak. I love stories. I love different cultures.